The guy actually sounds like that as well. It's kind of mad. Alright then. Let's fire up. Fire up. Test. Huh. As always. Yo. My battery's a bit low. What did I just do? Oh. Alright, we need a better build. It means we're gonna have to go like travel around for a bit, collect some points. Too close, damn it. No! Caught the animation! Ay. Mimic, you better take the role here, or take the lead. Come on, mate. Get up! He's almost phase 2. Oh, I flipped that. No, this is a bad run. Oh, sometimes I just get stuck in the animation. There we go, phase 2. But make sure I take that drink straight away. I've forgotten this guy's name. Oh yeah. Game's a bit quiet. It's always funny when they subtitle groans and noises. is that what that is spelled? Like, is that, you sure that's how you spell that? Alright, we're definitely going to get smashed straight away. It's going to take a number of very concentrated runs. What's up, Captain? Why should I think that's true? Why did he get such a long animation? Or cutscene, if you will. What's up? Oh, it didn't go too bad. Quick, on his ass, quick. He's too erratic, man. Oh my god, shield, no shield, same problem. Calm down, bro. Just stay still. Like, what kind of attack pattern is this? That's it, Mimic. Break his attention. Oh, what attack pattern is this? Ah, yeah, he caught me slipping. So it's free. Go on, Mimic. Distract his ass, that's it. Oh, slap me once. Damn this guy. What's up, Benson? What's up, JJ? Michael, no. Give me a reason to think that there's an afterlife. Why should I think that there's such a thing as an afterlife? No one made the world and all the living creatures. Banana. Everything comes about naturally. That means without any intervention. So, as far as we know, no one is responsible for anything. But shit, maybe you could change my mind about that. Right, we got Golden Vow. That second phase attack pattern was insane. I'm not even sure what to do with that. See, we can get Mimic with the magic. I deserve that. Wow. Wow. Woo. Crazy. Ah, new to roll as well. No, I'm dead. Oh my god, Mimic, distract him. Whew. Down to 5 blasts already. Cooked. Come on, halfway. Some double katana. Yeah, I've got katanas, but which ones? The thing is, like, you'd have to upgrade all the weapons at this point. I've got 2 max weapons that I've been using since base game. You know, so which katanas should I get? What's up, Mook time? Long time. You know. Banana, that's absolutely nonsense. Like, just tell me you don't know nothing, right? Oh my god. Alright, so Banana, which type of god did Einstein believe in? Since you're well versed on Einstein's biography and all that. Which type of... Nakiba, I've got that, but I doubt that'll do it. I'm already dead anyways. I've got enough life, yeah. No, exactly, see, Banana, I'm gonna ban you, bro. Spreading misinformation. Einstein was Jewish, did not believe in a Christian god, he believed in a pantheistic god. Stop spreading misinformation, you beg. My bad. Could have even been a deistic god if I remember correctly, but it definitely weren't a Christian god. Good God. The lies. Yeah, exactly. Why would a Christian lie and lie is a sin? Surprise me. So got some questions for you guys if that's the case. Nakiba's okay, but I don't think it's going to do the job in this one. It's worth a try, but let's give it a minute. Alright, anyways, nonsense aside. Why would I lie? What a loser. That's a good idea, actually. Oof! Oh, do you know what? Got me. Oh, lucky. Area damage. So anyways, if you're wondering what the point of the stream is, it's me saying humans invented God, and that's what's called an explanatory claim. We'll get into it a bit more after I have my fill of getting beaten up by Mesmer. And I'll maybe provide you with some visual aids, some theories that support the claim. Punk, go down. Oh, that's annoying. Yeah, so your God is definitely not responsible for the Big Bang or the beginning of anything, really and truly. There's no way to prove that. Whatever your God concept might be, we've never had evidence that gods actually exist as independent entities capable of having any meaningful effect on the world, in specifically the Christian God. So if you want to give evidence of your God creating the world, I would love to see it. I mean, the whole world's been waiting for thousands of years. But when you say your God created the world, you're literally saying that something can come from nothing. And that's like magical hopes and wishes. I would love for you to tell me exactly how your immaterial spirit of a God produces a physical material reality. Just like you might be new here, so you really don't know who you're talking to, but that's totally fine. If you would like to turn your attention to what's on the screen is an explanation of what I just said. Christians who say that their God created the world and everything in it literally believe that something can come from nothing. With typical religious minds, they go around the world on the earth projecting their beliefs and their identities onto other people. So your average Christian would say, oh, an atheist thinks something can come from nothing. No. What is on the screen is called creatio ex nihilo. It's Latin for creation out of nothing. It's a fundamental or foundational Christian doctrine that God created the universe, including all matter, energy and time and space, from absolute nothingness rather than shaping pre-existing material, right? It's something you can go research and look into for yourself. So the next time like a Christian, or I don't know, someone within the Abrahamic faith tells you that atheists think something can come from nothing, they're literally exposing themselves. This is one of their core beliefs. But then again, most Christians these days are just lukewarms. They don't actually know their actual religion or their book or the doctrine that goes with their book, so they're just like faking it, really. So this is why they say stuff like that. It's like a bit of projection, self-exposure type of stuff. But anyways, yeah, I don't think something comes from nothing, because that wouldn't make sense, right? Truth be told, nothing is like a linguistic thing that we came up with. It's actually the negation of specific things, but there's always something on a quantum level and on a galactic level. So these are things you should probably know. Anyways, let's go fight Mesmer some more. Hello, science lovers. What's up, Dropkick? What's up, Carp? I'll see you. Who's that? Yeah, so anyway, let's enjoy the boss fight for a bit, and then we'll talk more about the game. Well, more about the God, less about the game. Right. So at least see if we can get that guy down to that's a bad run already. Get this guy down to second phase consistently dead. Yeah, no one said atheism is science, bro. It's like, who would ever say that? It's like, yeah, anyways. like again, no disrespect, but chances are you don't know what you're talking about. So anyway, so what's on the screen is just to somebody's point that I was saying that their God created anything. Okay, but as I always say, right, there's no evidence of your God ever doing anything. Truth be told, there's no evidence your God exists outside of your mind. So let's get to it. When I say humans invented God, it's what's called an explanatory claim. So it covers the how and the why, and in some cases the when and the where. I feel it has explanatory success because it achieves that, and it also achieves predictive capabilities, meaning any God concepts and God beliefs that you might come across in the future, this hypothesis accounts for it. Okay, so like under those kinds of parameters, I think it would have explanatory success on what gods are, where they come from, why we think they exist, why people believe in them. There are three main phases to God creation. First phase is assigning agency to things. And how do we do that? Well, there's some cognitive theories behind it. The main one is what's on the screen right now. Again, if you're watching on a vertical stream over on YouTube, I'm kind of flying through this because I want to spend more time playing the game today, less time nattering if possible. So the first phase of God creations, God creation is necessary in order for you to have any concept of what a God is. It needs to be created. But going back to the first layouts, this is our ancestors. The first phase of God creation is assigning agency to things. How did they do it? They used what's called hyperactive agency detection device, or HAD in short, as an acronym. On the screen, you can read it for yourself and go research it a bit more. But I believe this is the foundation cognitively of how we began to come up or cook up God concepts. So I'll walk you through it as the stream goes on. HAD is a cognitive theory suggesting humans have an evolved built-in tendency to quickly attribute events, movements, and movements to intentional agents, e.g. people and spirits and gods. It's done to enhance survival even when none exists. Acts like a mental smoke detector for threats, which explains beliefs in the supernatural and feelings of being watched. Right. So in just simple common man terms, you're laying in bed, you hear a bump in the night, right? You assign that sensory data, the sound that you heard, to an agent. What is an agent? Somebody or something with the capacity to act. Okay, so when you hear that bump in the night, you assign it to a person or an animal or a ghost, right? Or a god or a demon, depending on how woo-woo you are, right? That's a simple explanation of what it looks like in modern times. We still have this cognitive device, if you will, today. People still do it, like the example I just gave you. But what that looks like in ancestral environments is early human experiences what me and you now know to be lightning, right? And they say to themselves, I have a mind, but I don't understand that thing. Therefore, there must be a mind higher than mine who either understands that thing or the thing itself is acting on its own accord. E.g., the lightning has now been anthropomorphized. It has agency. It's acting on its own accord. Right, of course, an early human has no idea what lightning and thunder is in the first place. So, of course, they would do this. But why do they do it? It's done to buttress, means support, chances of survival. Right? So they build story around the event. They capture the event, like in their language, in their culture, and over time it becomes deified through legend. Okay, that's how you get your first types of gods: celestial gods and elemental gods. I'll finish reading the explainer, then I'll tell you the next phases. So HAD was coined by a guy called Justin Barrett. HAD posits that a false positive seen an agent where there isn't one was safer in ancestral environments than a false negative, missing a real threat. This hypersensitivity leads to anthropomorphizing. Anthropomorphizing means giving things human features, human nature. This hypersensitivity leads to anthropomorphizing, seeing purpose in randomness, and forms the foundation for religious beliefs. Okay, so this is a completely it's a psychological thing, but it's built into us biologically. Right, we still make use of this today. Another example of how this was used in the past is you're out foraging for berries in your little tribe, right, your commune, and you see a bush rustle, right. Your mate sees it instantly and dusts off. He just runs, right? He's not waiting to find out what is in the bush, right? That is an example of hyperactive agency detection device. He's assigning agency to the bush. Why would he run? Because it ensures chances of his survival. If there is in fact a predator in the bush, or the bush itself is alive, if you're a spook, right, then his chances of survival are far greater by running away from it than staying to find out what the hell is in it. Okay, so that's an example of it. That's phase 1, assigning agency to things, right? Phase 2 of God creation is gaining the ability to use what's called abstraction. So phase 1 was observational. Phase 2 is psychological. It's happening in the mind, right? Abstraction comes when you start to be able to conceptualize things like love, war, death, creation, right? Magic, etc. These things don't have physical representations. They are psychological. A similar thing is done with the hyperactive agency detection, but what it's done for is for what's called psychological needs. It helps give certainty where there's uncertainty. It begins to help you formulate answers to questions that you couldn't necessarily have the answer to without scientific methodology. Right, so phase 1, assigning agency to things. Phase 2 is for psychological needs. Now phase 3 is when we're moving out of hunting and gathering into agriculture, polis, setting up civilizations, villages, towns, cities, so forth, right? Why do we start to develop gods then? We start to develop anthropomorphized gods, which stack agency and abstraction with human features. Now these gods start to mirror human hierarchy. Why is it done? For societal cohesion, so people can be organized into groups and mobilized under ideologies. You get your proto-religions and you start to get temples. Now, that's the 3 phases of God creation, right? Those 3 phases of God creation are evolutionarily necessary, if that's the right way to word that. They're necessary in order to get to the God ideas that you may have today from the Abrahamics, right? You know, like the 3-O God, an all-powerful creator God who's omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, right? What is on your screen right now, again, if you're watching on the vertical YouTube, you've got to come over to Culture Crack on the big main channel, or Set West 10 on TikTok, right? What you're looking at on your screen is not even close to an exhaustive list of gods from different regions, different cultures at different times and the roles they play. Quick word on this, right? How do we know anything about this data? We have archaeology, that means studying things found in the ground, left behind, artifacts being pottery, clay tablets, cloth, scripture, papyri, etc. from ancient cultures or just people who have passed away, right? And we also have anthropology, which is the study of humans, human history, human culture. So we learn about the artifacts that humans leave behind from what they actually create physically, but we learn about the meanings of these artifacts and the relevance of them in people's cultures through anthropology. The study of religion is also kind of anthropology, right? Anyway, so an example of the 3 phases of God creation that I just spoke about. Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, that's the Levant, that's the ancestors of the Israelites, the Akkadians, the Canaanites, etc. It's the Middle East, right? It's called the Levant. Ancient Mesopotamia, Iraq, it's modern day Iraq. They had a god called Enlil. He was the god of wind, air and storms. It's a Sumerian culture, right? What is wind, air and storms being deified, right? That is assigning agency to something elemental, as I explained with phase 1. Egypt, Northern Africa, they have a god called Ra, a sun god and a creator god. So you've got 2 there, right? A sun god is assigning agency to a celestial body, the sun, right? That means they're saying the sun is acting on its own accord. It has its own capacity. It smiles, like in the Teletubbies and shit, right? Jokes, right? But do you know what I mean, right? So you've got phase 1 there, assigning agency to something celestial, right? Now they've also got a phase 2 element. Ra is also a creator god. Creation is something abstract, right? Something you must conceptualize. You can express creation, but you can't hold creation in your hands, right? It's something that exists in your mind. Now, Greece, Europe, Zeus, they got king of the gods, sky and thunder. But what is a king? A king is something wholly anthropomorphic. You only find kings in what's called monarchies. And where do you find monarchies? Amongst human societies, right? So gods begin to mirror human nature. So now we have Zeus, which has direct hierarchy mirroring of humans. He's a king of gods. He's also man-like. He looks like a man, right? No animal head, no like sky cloud for a face, nothing strange. He looks like a man, he has children, he comes from Titans, right? But Zeus is also god of the skies and thunder. Phase 1. So through these examples, I've given you phase 1, 2, and 3. But for all 3 of the examples, they are actually phase 3 gods, right? Mesopotamia is a civilization. Greece is a civilization. Northern Africa, Egypt is a civilization, right? So Norse, Scandinavia, Odin, wisdom, war, death, and magic. Completely abstract, but he's also anthropomorphic because he's a man, right? He has a little raven on his shoulder. He has a son called Thor, which is the god of thunder, etc., right? So to simplify it and zoom out without the visual aids, and let's have some more fighting in the game, right? Humans have produced different god concepts across time, across regions, across the world. Do you know why they've produced different god concepts? Because throughout history, there's never been a universal idea of what a god is, right? Even if me and you exist in the same time, in the same region, in the same religion, right? I will have a different interpretation of what God is to what you will have, right? I will attribute events and happenings to God differently to you, right? In your mind, God's a guy in the sky. In my mind, God's Jesus, right? But we're technically part of the same canon, right? That's just an example of what I'm trying to say to you. Historically, there has never been a universal concept of what a God is, because God is an abstract concept. It's not something that is like that applies across the board. Hence why there are different configurations of gods. Before I go to the game, again, I'm going to be going over this various different points in the stream. I'll try not to bore you on a Sunday. But what is a configuration? A conceptual configuration is basically the function of the god, not just its attributes like I just explained, like with Zeus being king of the gods and god of the sky. It's what configuration Zeus fits into. Zeus fits into what's called polytheism, right? So that's many gods, or a pantheon, right? But historically, there's never been one configuration of gods. Ancient Britons had their ideas, Greece had their ideas, Scandinavia had their ideas, the Arab world had its ideas, the Indus Valley, modern day India had its ideas, etc. Right? And individual tribes within those lands and regions had their ideas. So what are the configurations? Monotheism, which as we know it now to be one main god, right? That comes about in the 6th century BCE in the Levant. Okay? So it's pretty recent in human history when you think about it, right? So monotheism, one all-powerful god. That's found in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Polytheism, many gods with different roles. That's found in Greek, Norse, and Hinduism. Henotheism, one main god, but others exist. That's early Israel and some Hindu sects. Who's early Israel? Judaics, right? Like the Jews, right? Who produce Christianity, right, off the back of their book, right? Pantheism, God is the universe. That's Spinoza and Advaita Vedanta. It's more philosophical. Panentheism, God is in all but beyond all. Still not sure what some mysticism is. Probably not supposed to know. And some process theology, right? Deism, a non-intervening creator God. That's the Enlightenment deists. Animism, spirits that inhabit nature. That's Shinto and indigenous beliefs, known to be one of the oldest God configurations found on the planet. Dualism, two opposing cosmic powers. That's Zoroastrianism and Gnosticism, right? So, if you had to explain this in simple terms to a child, right? Historically, there has never been one idea of what a god is, and no one in human history has ever gone out onto their native land and discovered the god of another land. Right? So let's get back to the gaming. So we're gonna want. But yeah, if you actually want to know my personal stance on this whole thing, it's this. All known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. If your god requires belief, imagination, or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. Okay. Let's have some more fighting. We're going to have to go reskill for this fight. I just know. I think we're too underleveled. Bloody hell. Ooh, rolled right into that. Sacrifice. Alright, sorry chat, I will be reading in a second. No, Mark, I haven't, right? I've heard of that a long time ago. I'm not really interested in that. I think that's, what's his name? William something, innit? William Cooper, if I remember correctly. I'm not really interested in that kind of stuff, to be fair with you. Bruv, he is wild. Alright, phase 2, come on. Might even need to get a better shield. That's it, step in. Damn it. Oh, it's Bill Cooper. Okay. I knew Cooper was in there somewhere. Yeah, I'm aware of the themes of that book. It's just, like I said, it's not something I'm really interested in personally. What's up? What's up? What's up, Charles? What's up, Alex? What's up, Alpha? Yeah, that's up to you to think that, right? Only problem is, do you know, we're not even going to get too deep into that, right? This conversation is about whether your God exists or not, and if you're able to change my mind on the evidence that I've accrued, if you will, right? So, what Bill or William Cooper has to say, I can't remember his name. You might be right, it's Bill, probably. Whatever he has to say, it's not. Unless you want to relay the major points of it, it's probably not relevant to the conversation, to be fair. Oh, this fight is a pain in the ass, man. We need to go level up. I know for sure. We need to find some more skidoos. Oof. Oh, I'm cooked. Literally. Alright. Oh, it just got me off the edge there. Good lord. So yeah, I don't know what God you believe in, but the chances of it actually existing are very slim, right? Specifically, if like your view is coming from a religious place, it's very unlikely you've got any true supportable evidence for your God, unfortunately. I mean, if just being frank with you, if there was good enough evidence of a God existing, I don't think we'd ever be having this conversation in the first place. But it's quite obvious in 2026 that all gods are created by humans. All God concepts must be devised by humans and transmitted by other humans in order for you to even be aware of them, or else everyone could have independent experiential data of gods, but they don't, right? So, not to shut down the whole conversation, I sometimes do that, but yeah, let's be honest, you don't really have much. And as I said already, if your God requires belief, imagination, or faith to interact with, then one could argue it's not even real. It doesn't exist outside of your mind. Oh, I'm cooked. Actually, I can see a little strat developing here. Got slapped up, but I can see a little strat there. No, so this, what I'm discussing, has nothing to do with beliefs, right? This is the problem. Right? Belief is your domain, right? It's not the domain of this conversation in any way. When I say humans invented God, it's called an explanatory claim, and it's supportable through archaeology, anthropology, and cognitive science. It's not a belief. Beliefs are necessary in terms of reasoning, right? But not religious belief. Religious belief is more about accepting things without proof. Right? That's what a religious belief is about. So, but the claim I'm making is definitely supportable. It's, as always, it's on you, right? If you're saying, this all-powerful creature exists in some capacity, to put forward evidence for that being the case, Stop. Nah, we're cooked. If we could find a way to limit all his jumping around as well, that might be useful. But he's also dangerous in the corner by the looks of it. Lucky me. He's brute. Oh, just about to roll. Death. So yeah, I'm saying all known gods are psychological constructs, do not exist independently of the mind. If your god requires belief, imagination or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. It requires somebody to devise a concept of God and impart it to you in order for you to interact with it, or you yourself have to devise a concept of God in order to interact with it. As far as I'm aware, there's never been evidence that a god existed, or one existed with any significant, meaningful interaction with reality, or capable. As far as I understand it, all gods are created by humans. No, that's absolutely incorrect. Like, you guys need to stop listening to half quarterly educated I'm joking, right? Just like poorly educated pastors that just spew nonsense to you. They're there for power play. They're not actually helping you in this. Right? It's best that you read your book for yourself, right, and understand what's in it. Atheism is literally just a lack of belief or disbelief in God or gods. So it's nothing more. It doesn't give you a worldview. It doesn't give you like anything else than that. So you could hold my position and not even be an atheist, ironically. So I wonder what would happen if we use this on him. I'm not going to get a chance to try it by the looks of it. Jeez. Yes, host does reply. I've not seen anything interesting to reply to though. Okay, what do you know about the origins of life? Why don't you tell me? There's no Adam and Eve, bro. When do you get good, bro? I made it this far. What do you mean? I'm like on my 4th play of the base game. It's my first play on the DLC, so of course I'm gonna get smashed. Give me a break. Yeah, there's no such thing as Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve is like is an ancient myth. It comes from the Sumerians and then gets passed down to the Babylonians and the Israelites. And then Genesis, and then the New Testament kind of builds off of all that nonsense. But there's no proof Adam and Eve ever existed. So. In fact, people that believe in Adam and Eve mostly believe that the Earth's like 6,000 years old. So I think humans as like a species been around for like 300,000 years. Some people argue it's closer to 100,000 years, but there's no reason to think that. Now, you should go and look at this for yourself. As I said before, I've only looked at this like surface level. But if you want to go look into it a bit deeper, what's on the screen is known as the creation of the world, a Sumerian myth, creationist tablet. And it should pertain to the foundation of what you find in Genesis with your Adam and Eve and your 7 days and all this nonsense kind of stuff. But yeah, so far as that actually happening, there's no evidence of that. All you have is the reportings of other humans. And who told the human, right? You just like God told them. How can we be sure about that, right? It'd be the same as you coming into this chat telling the rest of us, God told me this, and we'd just be like, yeah, whatever, bruv. Give us a reason to think God actually spoke to you and that you're not insane. Or maybe you just experienced a thought for the first time in your life and you thought it was something outside of your body. Like, you know. What's up, Louis? Or Lou? I appreciate that. I think that's. Look, I'm all for experiencing a world free of religion, but I can't see a pragmatic or ethical way to actually bring that into being. Yeah, like all the ways I can think of are very difficult to actually live out, you know. So you couldn't rationally convince the world, you know, to just give up their religion. Something would have to happen. So, but I'd be all for seeing a world without religion, just to experience what that might be like. Ooh, chaos. I think the best we could hope for is trying to help religions reform so they're not so destructive. I think that's probably the best we could hope for. Everything else would entail becoming like serious villains. Damn it, I missed him. The Ashes of War on these meteor blades sucks. Yeah, I don't have any religious beliefs, bro. I haven't got any reason to have a religious belief. I think religion pertains more to culture than anything else. If you actually open up a religious text, you'll see how little of the religious text is about God and how much of it is actually about humans and the happenings of humans, you know. What's up, Dag? Dag knows his stuff, bro. Dag knows his stuff, bro. So this is what's thought to be the Ark tablet. Decoding the story of the flood, and then Epic of Gilgamesh, as you were just mentioning. This is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Have fun reading that. That chicken scratch, I don't know what that is. But some scholars and archaeologists and people, linguists and whatever they call themselves, have found a way to decode these ancient Sumerian tablets and stuff. So they apparently know what it says. Big up to you, Dag. Well, so you're entitled to believe that, Eldero, but I don't think you can prove that. Maths is literally just a language that we devised to describe our physical reality. Ah, you got me. I'm dead. Ah! Why is he like this? Oh no! It's like the slowest wind up as well. It's just like, what the? No, that attack lasts way too long. What was that? We could actually beat him, you know. I think we just need to get a few more levels. Of course, you can disprove all different types of gods, right? If you, like, gods actually debunk themselves based on how people define them. I'll give you something to think about. To be a believer is to be in a catch-22. The more you define God, is the less likely it is to exist based on the attributes you assign to it, right? So what would be expected of the attributes you assign to it makes it less likely to exist. And on the other end of the catch-22, the less you define God is the more synonymous it is with non-existence. Within that spectrum of God types and God configurations, most gods debunk themselves based on how people define them. Right, so when people say, oh, you know, God exists outside of space, time and matter, but created space, time and matter, you debunked your own God just like that, based on the way you defined him. So you disproved the existence by your own definition of it. Okay, it can't entail contradictions. If there's a contradiction, then it doesn't exist. Right, it's not, you know, it's not a square circle. That can't happen. So yes, you can disprove various types of gods. The best type of God configurations truly come from philosophical minded people, right? But those gods that they cook up don't necessarily interact with the world in the same way that biblical gods cook up, okay? Or the biblical people cook up gods, or religious people. Most religious gods are probably the worst put together versions. They've been buttressed by philosophy throughout history. Century after century, religions take ideas from philosophers and add them into their religion through what's called doctrine and reinterpretation. Okay, it's what keeps their God concept stronger. But in terms of the God concept as it stands, it's most of them are terrible. Okay, so you can disprove them. Anyways, not to get too deep into it, but that's not my job. I'm not here to disprove gods. My claim is this: all known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. You know, when I say humans invented God, that's what's called an explanatory claim, and I feel it has explanatory success because we've got the how and the why, and in some instances the when and the where. I like to leave the door open for you to make the conclusions for yourself. But yes, if I wanted to be a hard atheist, then yeah, I would be shitting all over all of your God concepts all day, because it's very easy to do. But I like to more educate you on the how and the why, so you can make the conclusions for yourself. Yeah, that old chestnut's getting tired. You know, you can't disprove God though. Yes, you can. Right? You can. Again, I keep telling you guys, chances are most of your like congregation is probably smarter than your pastors and your fathers and shit. You guys just accept things without questioning it and just repeat it. But that's the realm of faith and belief. Now don't get me wrong, there are pragmatic uses for religion and faith, of course. But in terms of like making someone who thinks clearly and rationally believe in something, you can't do that. You can't convert someone that's thinking clearly. Right? They would see a pragmatic use and then, you know, start to take over what you're doing. So you should be aware of that kind of stuff. Oh, that done big damage, that's good. Yeah, I don't think you understood what I said, right? If your God concept entails contradictions, right, then by your own definition of it, you've disproved the existence. Various other scenarios like that come to mind too. But let's not get into that direction. I'm asking you to change my mind, right? Oh, Mimic is dead! Listen, you also got to remember, you're speaking to someone who's telling you humans invented God, right? Having a mind, being intelligent, being a creator are all anthropomorphic things that we would project onto our creations. In terms of there being like evidence of your idea of a God existing, you have none outside of your mind, right? It's not necessary to prove there is no creator, right? You just haven't got evidence of there being one in the first place. Okay? But look how much evidence there is on how things come about from a naturalistic perspective. You know? Those are things you should consider, right? But you're leaning on what's called a creationist myth, and that has everything to do with your beliefs and your cultures, and very little to do with reality as it is. Okay. But yes, you're never going to be able to say that the creation of the earth and human lives is evidence for your God existing. That's just your view, but it's not the case. So back to the point. I'm saying all known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. If your God requires belief, imagination or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. It requires somebody devises a concept of God and imparts it to you for you to interact with. Or you yourself have to devise a concept of God in order to interact with it. As a thought experiment, right, I'd like you to hold the image of an orange in your mind. You know, like an orange that you eat. Okay, that's what's called like a saturated concept. Right? God would be an unsaturated concept. Why is it a saturated concept? Because it has an object attached to it that you can see the primary and secondary features or attributes of it, right? The orange, okay? You can't see primary and secondary attributes of a God, right? So now, forget what I just said. Hold the image of an orange in your mind. Now, I want you to imagine the colour. You know the colour, you know the taste, you know the texture, you know the size, you know the shape, you know the scent, right? All of your senses are interacting with what an orange is, okay? But you also have a conceptual frame of what orange is in your mind without having to see it. Now, take away the taste, take away the colour, take away the size, take away the texture, you know, take away the scent, etc. Right? What you have is like a cartoon, a dotted line, right? An empty container of a concept which was once known as an orange. Right? Take away the colour too. God is like that empty container. Right? Without filling it with concepts, you cannot interact with it. So how does that work when we're talking about a God, since it's an unsaturated concept, right? God would be the empty container as a title or an entity of a sort, right? What you do in order to interact with that entity is you start to fill it with other concepts like omniscience, omnipotence, omnibenevolence, a creator, intelligent, you know, has the capacity to love, has the capacity to have anger. All of these concepts you must fill the empty container of God with in order for it to have any meaningfulness to you, okay? Since it's not an object that you can find in reality, you know, and extract data from observation and sensory data, right? It's something that exists psychologically. So you have to construct it psychologically. Hence why there's never been a universal idea of a God. Each culture, each region, each person produces a different concept of God, even if they get the outline, right? What's inside of the outline, what they fill that container with is completely psychological, right? As I said before, there are three main phases to God creation that must take place evolutionarily, right? The first is observation based, which is assigning agency to things that are elemental and celestial. So elemental things are like earth, wind, water, fire. Lightning and thunder would be considered elemental. A volcanic eruption would be considered elemental. A tsunami would be considered elemental. You know, an earthquake would be considered elemental. Right? These massive natural nature things that would leave a small human in awe. Right? Those things are elemental. Humans have what's called hyperactive agency detection device, which allows them to assign agency to those natural phenomena, right? Again, I'll put the visual aid on the screen. If you're on the vertical YouTube, you need to come over to Culture Crack on YouTube or Set West 10 on TikTok in order for you to look at what I'm showing you on the screen. Phase 1 of God creation, right, is assigning agency to those things that are observational, right? In order to arrive at the God concept that most people hold today, the popular God concept, which is, you know, an immaterial spirit, a disembodied God that is omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, a creator sometimes has a son, all of these different versions of it. In order to get to that popular understanding of what God is today, we have to go through an evolutionary trajectory of God concept creations and God types, right? Even the God of the Bible, and if you believe Jesus is God, right, comes from a lineage of God creation in the Levant, right? And it all starts from these phases which I'm describing to you, okay? So phase 1 of God creations in human history is assigning agency to things. Celestial things being the sun, the moon, Mars, Jupiter, etc. Elemental things being earth, wind, water, fire, right, and variants of those things. Hyperactive agency detection device is how our ancestors would have done it to begin with, right? So a hyperactive agency detection device is a cognitive theory suggesting humans have an evolved built-in tendency to quickly attribute events and movements to intentional agents, people, spirits, gods, ghosts and stuff. It's done to enhance survival even when none exist, and it acts like a mental smoke detector for threats, which explains beliefs in the supernatural and feelings of being watched, right? What does that look like without the jargon? You're laying in bed, you hear a bump in the night somewhere in your house, wherever you live, right? And you immediately assign that sensory data, because it will be a sound, right? That sensory data produces a sound that you interpret, right? And that sound releases chemicals in your body. It might be adrenaline, might be whatever, since you weren't expecting the sound, right? Your mind immediately assigns agency to that sound. You say to yourself, that's a burglar, or that's an animal, or that's a ghost, or that's someone going to the fridge. You've assigned agency to the sound, right? You've not visually seen it. Right? You don't need to, right? It doesn't matter which type of sensory input you get. If it's not 100% clear what is the cause of it, you will immediately go to assigning agency to it, right? That's an example of what it looks like in modern times, right? In ancient times, right? To our ancestors, that may have looked like this. We're out hunting and gathering for berries or whatever. Johnny sees the bush rustle, right? Like something's in it, and he just freezes, right? This is what's called fight, flight, or freeze, right? There's another one I can't remember, right? But the stimuli from the bush rustling makes Johnny freeze, right? While James takes off running as soon as he gets the sensory data of the bush moving, he takes off running. Why does James take off running? Because of hyperactive agency detection device. James has assigned agency to the bush, so there could be a predator in the bush, and it buttresses chances of survival for James to run away from that event, right? What would have happened, right, is likely if there was no animal or thing in the bush, Johnny would be fine. But if there was, Johnny would die, right? That's what it's built for. It's built for survival, but it goes past just simple natural interactions, and it goes into what's called law building, and then eventually legend becoming deified into entities, okay? Had was coined by a guy called Justin Barrett. Had posits that a false positive, like I just explained to you, seeing an agent where there isn't one, was safer in ancestral environments than a false negative, missing a real threat. This hypersensitivity leads to anthropomorphizing, giving things human nature, right? Seeing purpose in randomness and forms the foundation for what we call religious beliefs, right? Now, how does that get to gods, right? Ancestor sees what me and you today describe as a thunderstorm, the blackening of the sky, the rumble of the thunder, and then eventually the striking of lightning, right? Very large, awe-inducing things that one might still associate with gods, right? Again, this is foundational to our god concepts, okay? Hence why there's so many thunder gods, gods of lightning. Hence why, like in olden times, the interpretation of God breathing life into man was done through wind. Wind was thought of as spiritual. Right? This is psychological, and it's foundational to how humans operate. Right? So ancestor would have seen what me and you know as lightning. They would have said, I have a mind. Not so explicitly, because languages, of course, would probably not have been there. They would have gone through this like in a split second kind of thing, right? I have a mind. I don't understand what that lightning was. Therefore, there must be a mind higher than mine who's responsible for that lightning, or that lightning itself is acting on its own accord. It has agency, right? It's jumping around, it's blowing things up, it's setting things on fire, right? And over time, story gets built around that event of lightning and passed down to help buttress chances of survival. And what happens through that legend building, they begin to deify lightning into an entity, thunder into an entity, and they begin to start proto rituals of trying to appease the spirits, right? So they don't get struck down, or they don't get killed in a tsunami, or they don't get, in Mesoamerica, messed up by a volcano, right? This is Tangaroo is like, all of these things are important in terms of God concepts, building these God concepts in these various geographical locations, right? So that's what assigning agency really does, and it still happens today, okay? Now we have a lot more advanced language so people can cope with these things. They got Google, they got a parent, hopefully, that's clued up that they can ask, right? But that first phase of God creation is necessary in the trajectory of God creations to get to gods that you understand today as being immaterial spirits, right? The second phase is abstraction. Abstraction, again, it's a lot of jargon, it's a lot of things to think about. I really need to figure out how I can get some better visual aids so it don't have to be so, like, why is this guy giving me a fucking RE lesson? Excuse my language, right? But the second phase is is abstraction, right? So abstraction means thinking about things that aren't physically tangible, okay? So the idea of war can be expressed, right? The idea of love, the idea of magic, the idea of death, the idea of creation, right? The idea of wisdom. These things aren't necessarily physically tangible. They're like immaterial concepts that exist in what you might call the realm of your mind. But these things can be conceptualized and also deified. So as you're moving out of the stage of observation, which is assigning agency to things, you move into the phase of abstraction, right, which is conceptualizing things to give yourself answers. Why is that done? For psychological needs, to give certainty where there's uncertainty around big things like, why are we here? What happens when we die? Where did the trees come from? Why did the animals do that, right? What is the nature of life? All of these kinds of things. Now, they may not have been so linguistically capable of like going in depth as we are today, but it was necessary to get to that point of abstraction, right? The third phase is for societal cohesion. This is when anthropomorphizing fully comes into effect and we start to stack agency and abstraction with anthropomorphism. Why do we do this? For societal cohesion. We get proto-religions, we get temples, and we're moving from hunting and gathering to agriculture. So it now becomes structurally important for organization to mobilize people under ideology, okay? At that third phase of God creation is when we start to produce more advanced concepts of gods. And these more advanced concepts of gods can be found across, the evidence of these gods can be found across the world from all of the various civilizations that popped up. One of the oldest being Mesopotamia, right, or the Sumerians. The Mesopotamia, or the region of the Levant, is the ancestral starting place for what you call the Bible, right? Now, what's on the screen is just some artifacts from various different regions of the world that pertain to the spiritual or religious views that they had. So humans producing artifacts pertaining to these things, or stories and legends, okay? These are primary kind of, I wouldn't say primary, right? But these are necessary sources in having an understanding of what I'm saying to you, right? How can someone like me come along and say humans invented God? It's called an explanatory claim. And that explanatory claim, I feel, achieves explanatory success by demonstrating the how, the why, and in some places the when and the where. What are the functions, or what are the categories of determining the how, the why, and the when and the where? Archaeology, artifacts such as what's on the screen. Anthropology, study of humans, their histories, their cultures, their religions. And cognitive science, how one's brain actually functions, why one does what he does in the first place, right? Those are pieces of information you must collect in order to make a claim like what I'm making. It has predictive power as it covers the type of God concepts that we know and that we will come in contact with without having to posit the existence of any supernatural entities at all, right? If you were to say this isn't good enough, right, then it would always be on you to demonstrate evidence of your God actually existing as an independent agent capable of having any meaningful effect on our physical reality. Right, I was going to go through the God lists, but I've jargoned you enough like at this point, right? So let's have a gaming break, shall we? But yes, the God of the Bible must go through that same evolutionary trajectory, right? As we know, in the Levant, they had a bunch of gods from the Sumerians, three or four main ones, right? Inanna, Ishtar, Anu, and then Lil, right? Under that region of the world, they produced the Canaanites, the Babylonians, the Akkadians, the Amalekites, the Israelites, right? All of these different various, so like think about it like this, these are nomadic tribes living in a desert region, right? So like they've got like a north and a southern part. It's just like, I'll show you the map in a minute so you can look at it for yourself. But the Israelites and the Canaanites are living under a system or a configuration of gods called henotheism. It's like pantheism, but it's a bit more personal. So people will say this tribe has their primary god, but they acknowledge that that tribe has a god too. The Hindu, in the Indus Valley, the Hindus were living under a similar system, right? We have this God in this region or in this commune, they have that God in that commune. Our prophets or our, like, you know, our guys, our shamans or whatever you want to call them, they interact with each other and have anyways, right? They would debate each other and then battle with what's called like miracles and shit, right? Excuse my language. But the Israelites are functioning under a system of monotheism with the Canaanites. They're having battles, having wars with their prophets and their gods. The Canaanites have a pantheon that starts with El Elyon or Elohim, which is the king of gods, the God Father. Under him, you got a god called Asherah, Marduk, and Baal. Right? Marduk is a bit debated now. There's what you know as Molech is not necessarily Marduk or Marduk. Right? Molech is now, like, scholars think Molech is actually the name of a process of human sacrifice or child sacrifice. So it's not necessarily a god. It itself was a process of sacrifice, and that sacrifice was done for Baal, for El Elyon, for Yahweh. Who is Yahweh? A storm warrior god of the Israelites. Time goes on. The Israelites take elements from El Elyon and make Yahweh God the Father like El Elyon is. Asherah is removed from the pantheon. Baal is demonized. Marduk is just kind of forgotten. And Yahweh becomes El Elyon, God the Father. If Yeshua, a Bronze Age Judaic priest who studied under John the Baptist, actually exists and was born, he would have been born believing in Yahweh as the God, Hashem, Adonai, whatever they would have called him at that period of time. But in order for the Israelites to produce Yahweh, they needed to take elements from El Elyon, Elohim, and make Yahweh the God. Right? After they leave Egypt, they come back to that region of the world, and the Zoroastrianists have enlightened that whole part of the world, and they help the Israelites formulate the final version of God the Father with your, like, dualistic perspective of good and evil, right? God and the devil kind of thing. That's what forms the view of God that most people have today. Now, if you don't know all of that stuff, right, you won't be able to say the kind of things that I'm saying to you. It's necessary for that God creation trajectory to happen all over the world where civilization has sprung up in order for you to believe in any type of God today. Because historically, there's not been a universal concept of God. There have been different regions who produce different types of gods for cultural needs, specific. And what humans do is transmit these ideas through words, through artifacts like we just looked at. And other humans say, I like that concept, I'm going to take it and add it to my concept. I like that concept, I'm going to take it. I don't like that, we'll stop practicing that sounds bad, you know. And from that you get an amalgamation of God concepts. But so much of the God itself existing as an independent entity, there's never been evidence of that. If you had to explain this to a child, all you need to say to them is, look, there's never been a universal concept of God. Everyone's mind, everyone's culture has their own version of a God. And no one has ever been able to walk out onto their native land and discover the God of another land. For instance, the God of ancient Britons, one of them was a god called Brigid, a goddess of smithing, poetry and healing, hyper-specific to the culture and the needs of that culture. They wouldn't have gone out onto the British Isles and discovered Yahweh from the Levant, or Ra from Northern Africa, or Zeus from Greece. They produce a god necessary for the needs of that culture, just like they produce Yahweh for the gods, for the necessity of the people in the Levant, or the Israelites, right, and Canaanites, etc. Just like Ra was produced for the Egyptians. Okay, humans produce God concepts, and during human trajectory, the evolution of humans and our mingling of cultures, clashing of civilizations, different people have got together and developed more advanced ideas of God. Within theology, there's always been an element of philosophy, but in the past, when you want to say 500 or 600 years, maybe a bit longer, philosophy has primarily been the running engine supporting theology. Okay? But in order to, like as I was trying to say, in order to get to the God understanding you have today, it's buttressed by philosophy primarily, because the theological ideas alone don't hold weight anymore. They're like things like Genesis. If you speak to a theologian, things like Genesis cannot even be taken seriously as like an actual account of events. It has to be read or interpreted allegorically or metaphorically, because all the evidence on the world, or through science and actual data, points to different answers. Right? So what do? You adapt to your God concepts, you update them by buttressing it with philosophy. That's what's called post hoc rationalization.
And if you study some Christendom and like Christian history and Islamic history, you can see the points in time where brilliant minds have come up and they've put forward ideas that the church or the mosque or the temple have taken on and reinterpreted their God through. Right? It helps them stay alive. It helps them update. The Israelites or the Jews' God of the Bible, Hashem, Adonai, whatever they would have called him, Yahweh, wasn't necessarily having the attributes of a God we think of today as omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent. Right? These are concepts that have to be developed and put into the God container, like I said earlier on. Like someone would say, God is all possibilities. That's a philosophical view on what a God could be, but it's not necessarily the concept that was developed primarily. Right? It was hyper specific to a specific culture. Right? All gods are. Now, anyways, the guys are like, oh, this guy is just talking. Yeah, but and that's another thing, Miss Rhonda. There is no hell. That's another example of exactly what I'm saying to you. Hell from the Bible is a mistranslation. It's a mixture of Greek culture and Hebrew culture. That's how you get an idea of hell. The New Testament was actually written to bridge the Greek world to the Hebrew world or the Levant. I'll show you in a minute. I'll show you the excerpts for yourself, but just Google it in the meantime. The word hell is a mistranslation of Sheol, so it's like the grave, and then you've got Gania or something like that, and Hades. These ideas are mixed together to give you the vision of what you know hell to be. But hell is not actually a thing. So you just don't know, because you don't know, or you're ignorant. But just look at it for yourself, right? I have no reason to lie about this. In fact, I'm the ops, so you should listen to your ops when they're telling you when you're failing. Anyways, it's your friends that you got to worry about. I'm joking. No, I don't think I'm here to convince the brainwashed at all. That's not my job to do. No, I'm here to make you engage in some thought in the first place. It might be a bit much to call it a dialectic or dialectical exchange, right? But that is the hopes. It opens the door to more critical thinking, more important subjects in society. That's why the conversation will go in different places, not just God talk. But that's the point, to get you to think. No, man, I ain't Blair's nothing. Anyways, right, I've been yapping way too much. So, as someone was saying, right, they don't believe about the hell thing. On your screen is just like a little excerpt. You can go fact check this for yourself, right? I'll read it to you. The word hell in the modern English Bible translation is considered a mistranslation, or more accurately, a conflation of four distinct unrelated terms, Sheol, Hades and Gehenna, and Tartarus, into one concept. Early translations, including the King James Bible, used hell to represent these terms, which originally meant the grave, the underworld, and a place of destruction, or the abode of the dead, rather than a place of eternal torment, right? So like, religious and scriptural critique is not my thing. I really could care less of what your book has to say, right? But it's on you to go and look at it for yourself. There's no this, to me, this is trivial information, not worthy of actually arguing about, right? Because whether the Bible writes that the Jews did this and hell exists, or whatever they write in the Bible is secondary to whether a God exists or not. Right? That's what you need to understand. Right? It's completely secondary. All religion pertains to is human cultures and happenings of humans in history. They mix in their religious beliefs and their supernatural beliefs with that telling. Right? This is the best way to put it. Religion is codified culture. Okay, so all of that, to whether a God exists, is trivial. A God could absolutely exist and religion still be completely off the mark. A God could exist and Big Bang be true. A God could exist and evolution and abiogenesis be true. Any number of things could be the case outside of your religious text. Okay, But if you didn't see what I just put on the screen, you need to be on the main channel, which is at Culture Crack on YouTube or SetWest10 on TikTok, Culture Crack on Twitch as well. Forget Twitch don't really get much love. I forget about him. But yeah, Dano, I appreciate. Danon, thank you for that, for the likes, bro. But yeah, like that whole little, digression, if that's the right way to put it, about hell and all that. It's just funny. It's because like, oh, you're gonna go to hell. It's like, bro, hell doesn't exist. It's like, I find it funny for those reasons, anyways. But it's in terms of importance, it's very little. Oh. I mean, yes, it's definitely possible, right? As I said, like, religion pertains to human cultures. It's about keeping the traditions, the identity, the geographical facts, and like their myths and those things alive, their customs and stuff like that. If you actually open a religious text, very little of the text is actually to do with God. It's usually about the stories of men, written allegorically or metaphorically to teach you something. That's the point. But in terms of your God existing, there's just not enough. Well, not enough. There isn't any sufficient evidence of it existing in that capacity. Anyways, right, let's actually try and beat this guy. I know we can beat him. I think it's just a matter of getting a level or two up. So I might have to go mine some points. Oof. Still hit me. Huh? How did you do that then? Dead. That's it. Anyways. So I'm saying humans invented God. My position is all known gods are psychological constructs, do not exist independently of the mind. If your God requires belief, imagination or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. But if you disagree, feel free to present some evidence or some proofs in contrary to that. Hey, appreciate you, Dag. No, atheism is just a disbelief in God or gods. In fact, everyone that's ever been born in human history was born as an atheist. Well, let's not put it like that. The minute that a God concept was devised, everyone after that point was born an atheist. That's all atheism is, the disbelief in God or gods. You wouldn't be born agnostic. You don't need to have knowledge of a God in order to be atheist. Okay. You'd be born an atheist, and then somebody transmits their concept of God to you, probably as a child, and convince you to believe in it. And then you leave being an atheist and you become a theist. Okay, that's how that works. But in terms of atheism being something else, it's literally just you create something. By creating the thing, you create the negation of the thing. It's as simple as that. Right? The minute someone devised the God concept, they gave birth to atheism. Right? Even if the God concept was shit. Someone said, you know what, I'm going to call that bunion on that woman's toe a god. Now you created atheists. It's your own fault. There's people anyone that did believe that woman's bunion was a god was an atheist, right? That's just how that works. Now, in terms of there being groups of people with specific ideologies under the banner of atheism, yeah, there are lots of them. Just like there are groups of people with different ideologies under the banner of theism. But the actual bare bones of what the word means is just that, the disbelief in God or gods. It's just simple as that. But yeah, like I put it to you this way: if you're hell bent on this us against them kind of worldview, then yeah, like you're not a productive human. You're kind of the problem. But that may not be inherently a you thing, right? If you was to get, like, I don't know, someone to do like an interesting analysis on what monotheism entails, you could actually say monotheism is the least harmonious religious concept ever to be devised by humans. It's the most divisive, the most divisive historically, right? Wherever scarcity is produced, it creates conflict. Especially when you can say, we're the saved, you're the sinners, we're the clean, you're the dirty, we got the one true God, you got the fake, right? It's designed to cause division, right? Whereas henotheism is more harmonious, pantheism more harmonious, animism, deism, polytheism. Any of these other configurations of gods are far more harmonious for humans on Earth than monotheism. Monotheism, wherever it's found, you'll find destruction because it creates its own enemies. So consider that. Oh, look at Tez knows his stuff. Look at that. First guy to actually know what the hell's going on. I'm just playing. No, it's observational. Like I said, it's not my job to build a case against theism. I'm just telling you that humans invented God. But if I wanted to be like an anti-theist, that is one of the strongest pressure points of monotheism. How problematic and destructive it has been historically. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, wholly destructive religions wherever they have gone. So that's not just an opinion. That's supportable statistically. You know. But again, that's not my job to do. So I'm cynical. Yep, that's one of the ways. It's one of the ways for sure. Yep, Elden Ring. I wouldn't even say this is rage bait though. I think it's just people are living in a world where like their cognitive dissonance is so high that they can't engage with anything that opposes what they believe or what they think. You're supposed to engage with people who think and believe different things to you in order to get a well-rounded view of your own position, if not change your position. But guys are just like it's just this spoiled brat mentality that everything must be for you. If it's not for you, just move on. If you can't control your feelings, because necessarily your emotions aren't necessarily in your control, but if you can't control your feelings or at least express them in a less dysfunctional way, then yeah, you're going to cause problems for other people and you're going to constantly be enraged, and through that rage, you know, issues will unfold. But it's not a rage bait in any way. It's the type of conversation you're willing to have. If you approach me rudely, I'll approach you rudely. If you approach me intellectually, I'll try my best to approach you intellectually too, right? It's on you, right? I think although I might not be entirely well studied on all matters of the subject, I put quite a lot of time into it. So it's not just that I just want to make you annoyed. Like, I've actually got some information to share with you if you want to hear it. But back to the baseline, humans invented God. All known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. There are three major phases in God creation historically. The first and most important phase is assigning agency to things. It's based on observation, elemental things and celestial things. The second phase is abstraction. It's the ability to conceptualize, and it's done for psychological needs, to give certainty where there's uncertainty. And the third phase is anthropomorphizing, for societal cohesion. It's when you start to mobilize people under ideologies and organize society, move from hunting and gathering to agriculture and civilization. This is 100% necessary. Yeah, I'm reading the chat, bro, but you just waved. What's there to say to that? Again, if you disagree, feel free to present some information, or, that might change my mind. As far as religious views go, I take religion to be what's called codified culture. It's literally just human culture written down into a book form, kept alive via rituals, prayers, dress, food, pilgrimage, etc. I don't take religion to be the primary subject or topic when discussing God, because based on what I understand, God concepts are thousands of years older than the religions that we know of today. So, if your best kind of footing for your God beliefs or your understanding of God is just your own religion, then you might not be equipped for this conversation, to be fair. Yeah, as I said, bro, if your God concept, right, whether that's a Trinitarian view of God, Holy Spirit and Jesus, relies on your belief and faith and hopes in order for it to actually be a thing, then it's likely not to be that thing. It's not conformable to nature, right, as the Socratics would say. Well, not even the Socratics, right, but it's not real, right? That's completely mind dependent, right? It's imagined. So all of this, you just gotta have faith and all this, yeah, that's cute, right? We can talk about faith after we've determined what there is and what there isn't, But that's the religious kind of interpretation of a fairy tale. It's not necessarily discussing God, whether he's an entity or wholly conceptual. You're not even addressing the main subject. You're caught up in religion, which is like low level discussion. It's not pointless, fruitless discussion, but it's not enough to demonstrate the existence of a God. There are many religions. I'll put it to you like this. If you actually wanted to be reasonable, or like go about your search for information, or however you decide to do this, and really think about, how would I prove God exists, or how would I at least convince some skeptics that my God exists? There's two ways you can go about this. You can go about it in a philosophical way. You can go about it in a empirical way. Well, philosophical can also entail empiricism, but just for the example, the first way is looking for empirical evidence. If you're claiming your God interacts with our physical material reality, then there's some basic criteria that you need to fulfill in your empirical evidence, or just a starting point. You may not be able to fulfill all of them, but just so you know what people will be looking for. So it needs to be mind independent. So it can't be things that just occur in your brain alone, right? No personal testimonies. It needs to transcend religion and culture. So the event that's claimed to be attributed to your God needs to transcend religion. It needs to transcend a particular culture. So it can't just be, God's chosen people in this religion, he revealed a miracle to them. Or it can't just be God revealed himself in this only in this region at this time with people that speak this language, right? So it needs to transcend culture and religion. It needs to be mind independent. Of course, empirical evidence needs to be measurable and testable. It also needs to defeat any competing hypothesis. Okay, give you an example of the type of miracle you'd want, but that's getting a bit too nitty gritty. So on your biblical God side, right, if you're saying God is he interacts with our physical material reality, then a skeptic like me would want to see some empirical evidence that meets that criteria. Mind independent, transcends religion, transcends culture, can be measured, and defeats all competing hypotheses. Now, if you're on the philosophical end of God beliefs, then you're saying your God doesn't necessarily interact with our physical material reality, so it's more like a metaphysical principle. So for that type of philosophical God, all you would need is a really solid syllogism or logical proof of some form, right, to demonstrate why your theory is correct. So if you were going to go about looking for some evidence or a way to convince a skeptic or a non-believer that your God exists, they're the two avenues that you're looking at. Something empirical or something philosophical, right? But as I always say, to be a believer is to be in a catch-22. The more you define God is the less likely it is to exist based on the attributes you assign to it. The less you define God is the more synonymous it is with non-existence. So you can decide where you sit on that spectrum, right? Yeah, if someone knows a God is real but can't express it to you, then that's a mind dependent thing, right? How can I subjectively or intersubjectively or objectively verify what's happening in your mind? In fact, I don't even know if your mind operates in the same way as my mind. You could be a zombie, you could be a mutant, right? You could be brain dead, right? Maybe you don't have what, you could be an NPC, you could be a bot. Like, how can I even verify your mind functions the same as mine? I presuppose your mind functions like mine based on your anatomy, but it's not necessarily the case. Right? So if it's a completely mind-dependent thing, that is your proof of God, then it just simply wouldn't suffice. Right? If I was to give you an example, it'd be like everyone here is sat at a dinner table, like everyone in this chat across the streams that we're streaming now, and we're all just having a natter like we are. Then someone comes in, right? He's some of our friends, some of our, like, just a stranger to some of us, and he sits down, he says, you know what happened last night? An angel revealed itself to me and it told me all the will of God and what God wants me to do in the future. Right? Some of us can be like, you're right, John, right? Let's call him John. Some of us can be like, well, tell me more about that, John, right? So in the process of John, like, giving his testimony of what happened with the angel revealing himself and telling him what God wants him to do, some of us are going to take him seriously and some of us aren't, right? For the ones of us that choose to take John seriously, there's going to be a process that we go through. It might be quick, might be long. First process is assessing John as a person, his character. Does John lie? Is John psychologically intact? All right? Is John going through any stresses? So we assess him as a character and his testimony. Some of us decide, John is alright, he's not lying, he's not crazy. Some of us decide, nah, John's a madman, right? The people that decide he's a madman, just forget about him. People who decide, nah, John's not crazy and he's not lying, they go to the next step of inquiry, right? Which would be to set about recreating the conditions necessary to experience what John has reported experiencing. So now we're going to start collecting data about what John claims to have experienced. Where were you, John? How did you feel? What was the temperature? What did you eat that week? Any strange happenings that year? What happened leading up to that event? At the point where we can't recreate the conditions necessary to experience what John reports experiencing, right? All that would be left to do then, it'd be two groups again, is to believe, which is to accept without proof, or to not believe, right? And that is where you sit with the mind-dependent experiences of God, right? You're literally just reporting something to someone which they cannot intersubjectively or objectively verify. And that is ultimately the realm of religion. All of the things that is reported in religion and religious texts is based on mind-dependent events that other men have written down for you to read and interpret. At least when it pertains to supernatural things, right? As so far as John coming in and saying, I saw a car crash happen, right? And there's actually an engine sitting on the motorway right now. That meets the criteria of what can be found in reality. Yeah, cars do exist, motorways do exist, sometimes engines come out, right? So there could be some evidence of that happening. We've got very little reason to distrust John's testimony on a thing like that, you know? And that can be akin to someone saying, in the Bible, there's this geographical place, e.g. the motorway. There was this actual vehicle, e.g. a chariot. And in this place, a chariot can be found to this day, right? That's fine, right? That pertains to human happenings and geographical realities, right? But when you move past realities into supernatural events, you don't have that physical representation of it, right? So it just becomes a mind-dependent event that you're reporting. Me personally, I might not go through that long process that I just gave you an example of with John. I'm just going to hear what you say, and I'm going to be like, I don't know Glorious from YouTube, don't know who he is in the world, don't know what he is, all right? It could be a bot. Why should I believe Glorious experiences and knows God speaks to him? All right? I'm not going to go through the process of character analysis, and trying to recreate the conditions necessary. I'm just going to say, all right, cool, right? Maybe you should come back and tell me about the things you know when you got some solid proof, Glorious, as I don't have the time to assess you as a person. So that's the problem. Why, if you're looking for empirical evidence, it has to be mind independent. The evidence would have to stand. If you as a person died, someone could come and still get the same results from the evidence that you're claiming is there, right? Either way, right? But yes, if you don't understand what I'm saying there, maybe you just need to rewind the stream so you can get better understanding, because it's a lot to go into. Gym split is a bro split, Albert, bro. Just doing bro. That's a good point, right? God of the Gaps is a big part of it. It's a big part of it. Huge part of it. Mate, we're going to need some serious buffs, man. I know I'm going to have to spend time mining points. I think that's what we should do, because it's getting boring, isn't it? Science is definitely not God. And to be fair, the people that still think science and religion are in conflict are just not paying attention, right? Science and religion are not in conflict. It's simple-minded people who take that view. You can be religious and be scientifically inclined. You can be very much you can offer lots of great things to science and keep your religious beliefs, right? Science and religion are not in conflict. In fact, science has been with us since the beginning of mankind. To create tools is a scientific process. To start a fire is a scientific process. To devise language is a scientific process. To hunt and to gather is a scientific process. To produce clothes is a scientific process. To turn milk into cheese is a scientific process. To get milk out of a cow is a scientific process, right? It's only when science has been codified in recent human history that people view it as something different. Science has always been there. Religion, on the other hand, hasn't always been there, right? But philosophy, which is the foundation for religious views, has always been there. The art of thinking has always been there, okay? Science and religion are not in conflict. Look, I put it to you like this. If I had to choose between the ancient creation myth, right, that becomes Genesis, and the current scientific understanding, I'm taking the current scientific understanding. If you're someone that says God created the world or the universe and everything in it, you're someone that literally thinks something can come from nothing. Why should I believe that, right? Give me a good reason why I should believe something should come from nothing. I know what you're going to say. Oh, but it's atheists that think something can come from nothing. No, you fool. That whole trail of thought, that whole idea is religious. Right? It's ultimately a religious view. As you can see on the screen, creatio ex nihilo is something coming from nothing. And that is a foundational Christian or Abrahamic view. So if you want to explain to me why I should think something can come from nothing, or better yet, how an immaterial spirit produces a physical material reality, go for it. I want to hear. But as far as I understand, nothing is not an actual thing itself, right? Nothing is the negation of specific things used linguistically. If I tell you go to the cupboard and get me a can of tuna, and you go there and you don't find any cans of tuna there or anything in there, you come back and report there is nothing there. But you know what is there? Particles, the cupboard, you know, all these various things are always there, right? Whether you're talking on a quantum level, which is like micro, or macro level, which is like galactic, there is always something there. Okay, but you don't even know what you're talking about. So I guess for you, 0 and 0 does make 1. Let's go mind points, bro. This is getting jarring. I'm not here to answer your questions, bro. You can't walk me through Socratic reasoning. I'm here to ask you questions, truthfully. Not in arrogance, but I have information to share with you. If you have information to share with me, please do. Right? But don't think you're in that position. You're not. No, not in those terms, but you can tell me about it. I think there was a puzzle in this place that you're supposed to figure out with these things, but kind of gave up on that. Such a fool. Yeah, so if you think your God actually exists and created humans, then I'd like to know your evidence for that, right? Well, yeah, the human eye is definitely not a proof of God creating that. If anything, human eye is a bad example of that. You know, like your immune system can reject your eye from your body should it realize it's there, turn you blind. So in terms of design, it's not a good example at all. But yeah, I'm not sure. Right? I've heard the terms irreducible complexity thrown about before, but I'm not really sure what that entails, to be honest. All right, let's go gather some points. This area is clearly dry. Where was the best? There was like a village that you could fight people in. It was like this area. No, I like the sound of your voice, the sound of the tapping of your keys. What? I don't think that's true, Divvy Beer. How do you get it with a cape? I was always reading. You just didn't say anything interesting. This is the problem with people. With all due respect, I got to skim through hate comments, troll comments, and then the occasional serious person. There's no way in hell I'm gonna waste my brain capacity trying to read it all, knowing that you guys are mostly just here to fuck about or be rude, you know. So why should I reply? No one invented humans. So there's no evidence of anyone ever inventing humans. But it's not impossible. That's what I would say. But it's just clearly no evidence of it happening. I don't think removing one component of something is proof of God. It's just like saying, silly example, but it's like saying if a cat wasn't a cat, it wouldn't be a cat. Like, yeah, no shit. But it doesn't explain why the cat is the cat, how the cat became the cat, you know? I know it's a silly example, but maybe that's the simplest way to explain it. I think the fact that organisms function the way they do on Earth is more proof of their need to survive, to adapt, right? If a god has the capacity of all knowledge and all power, then why bother creating things in such a way where, one, they have to consume life in order to sustain life? Obviously, that's not harmonious in terms of all of your various creations, right? And the other thing, why create a system where everything is not fully actualized to its fullest potential in the first place? Okay, surely the fact that things must evolve and progress is evidence that they're going through a natural process without any intervention. That's my opinion, though. And I think if you was to look at it like from a scientific level, that would be supportable. Whereas saying there's an immaterial spirit or entity who's responsible for all things, is you don't even, one, have like a solid place to start, and two, it's just like, I was going to say something else, but let's not go there. But yeah. Is the stream glitching by any chance? Can you hear me clearly? Oh, it's way behind. But yeah. Alright, I'm just going to pause it and just refresh it. Yeah, so sorry if you like. You'll probably hear my replies quite late if I am replying to questions, because there seems to be a lag or a delay. Oh yeah, I was saying earlier on, I forgot to show you. But that is the Levant. That is the region of the world that's called the Levant. Okay. This is what produces, like, where your modern day Jerusalem and all that stuff is. Okay. It's what produces your views of the Abrahamic faiths, the God of Abraham. His evolutionary trajectory is in this region of the world. It's absolutely paramount, necessary. The Mesopotamians do what they do, the Canaanites do what they do, the Israelites do what they do, etc. The Roman Empire comes into power, Phoenicians mix, Egyptians mix, Greeks mix, in order for you to get what you get today. Whether you believe in Jesus or just God of the Bible or Allah or Hashem, Adonai. The history of the events of humans and happenings of humans are paramount to your views of gods, which again builds the case of gods being the invention of humans and not being independent entities at all. Yeah, there's no reason to think there's such a thing as a spirit realm. No, well, there's no good reason anyway. You can hold it as a belief, as a possibility, even in, like, if you're like one of those modal type of speakers, you can hold it as a possibility. Is there a possible world where there are spirits? Yeah, I guess. And then by that standard, I guess they exist, right? But truth be told, I've got no reason to think there's such a thing as spirits or spiritual realms. Yeah. But are they impossible? Not entirely, but just not provable currently. Damn, boy. Ah, he's got his gang. Dead. There's actually lots of those guys here for some reason. That didn't give him as much points as I thought it would. What do you mean creating another religion? There are many religions, bro. but I'm not quite sure what you're trying to say. It wouldn't really matter what I think about a chair moving across a room. What difference would it make what I think? It's what I could prove, you know. I would have to study the environment, the chair itself, to find out what's behind it. Just simply invoking a supernatural like entity to explain what might be a natural phenomena wouldn't get me any closer to the truth. Like what is a spirit? How do I quantify it? How do I understand it? What is it? What are its attributes? What is a ghost? What, you know? Whereas you're talking about a chair, which is something physical, we've got evidence of that. You're talking about something that's operating under the laws of physics. So there could be a good answer. Maybe something that's not immediately obvious, but it's probably a good answer to why and how that is happening. You know? If it's worth studying, you know. But just to jump immediately to, you know, something magical is exactly what I was saying earlier on. The foundational mechanism or cognitive function of a human, which is assigning agency to things, hyperactive agency detection, is exactly that. Is what will make you think it's a spirit, it's a ghost. Okay? No way he does that. There was one area in the map like where there was just, every enemy was given like 4,000 to 5,000 points. It's definitely not here. Yeah, to be fair, ghosts never made sense to me anyways, right? As a kid, like, a cartoon ghost makes sense, but an actual ghost doesn't make any bloody sense. If you think about the billions of humans that have ever existed, if you lived in, like, a densely populated place like a city, you wouldn't be able to move without being with a ghost. There'd be a ghost absolutely everywhere, at all times. So it doesn't really make sense. But that's just one of the things that probably worth thinking about. Baby. Man, I really don't know what we should do. Know what we could do though? Let's go have some boss action in the main game. It's Elden Ring, bro. I've already beat Millennia. Smashed those to bits every single time. You didn't see the Hague tree had all of the sites of grace. Millennia ain't even that tough, bro. What's up, Pixel? Yeah, thanks for the comments. Obviously, I've not seen them all, so don't think I'm being disrespectful. It's just not humanly possible. What do you mean by PCR? No, I wouldn't say they're useless words, but in terms of them having a representation, they don't really do that anymore. It would, like, a soul or a spirit made a lot of sense how the Greeks were using it before they had psychoanalysis or language or vocabulary to describe the mind, right? But there's still like a colloquial or pragmatic use for the idea of souls. Like if you're referring to the soul of a sport, you know, soul music. Like it has this, soul has an immaterial connotation, but when used with other words, it makes sense to this immaterial thing that you're pointing at, right? But when it pertains to a human, this immaterial thing that you're pointing at is very difficult to say. Aren't you just describing the mind then, you know, or some element of the mind? Oh, I forgot what I was doing. Oh, no, I've not got to Radan yet. I don't even know how to find him. I'm stuck on that Mesmer fight. Yeah, those are strange beliefs to hold. In my view, they're not really justified beliefs either. Oh. I should have took a rune. That's what I did. I used the thing instead of a flask, didn't I? That was a mistake. Why have I got so few flasks? Yeah, I'm dead. I've beaten Bale already. I've beaten Commander Guy, so however you pronounce him as well. The guy on the wild boar, the dragon I've beaten. Mesmer is the last person I've found so far, or the most recent enemy that I found. Oh, how long have I been online, bro? It's like 12 o'clock. Look at this. It's getting so fun talking to you guys that I forget what the time is. Alright, we're coming close. So if you haven't already, hopefully you enjoyed the conversation, at least some of it. Please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. It's at Culture Crack. We've got a lot of suppression happening on that channel. Releasing some documentaries in the coming weeks. And at the minute we're getting no traction over there. I know why. It's basically sensory, like, based on the stuff that we said. That's the right way to put it. But yeah, just, like, talking about your government and stuff like that doesn't really get you props on the algorithm. so consider giving us a subscribe on the YouTube channel, which is Culture Crack, or even a Twitch channel if you're just here for the streams primarily. And if you haven't already, come over to the TikTok side of things, which is SetWest10, and give me a follow on there. So I forgot what I was doing again. Let's try and focus in. I might need that for later. Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate you. Do you reckon shorts like what? Like, I find clipping like horrendously long. It's like very difficult as well. Now, if you get an AI to do it, you never know what you're gonna get, and people are like, "What's the context?" Maybe I'm just lazy, probably. Bro, it's impossible for Jesus to do anything, bro. There's not even evidence that Jesus existed in that capacity, right? There's, like, if I was being charitable, I could say there was a guy called Yeshua, who's a Bronze Age Judaic priest, studied under John the Baptist, had his own disciples. But that guy is not necessarily the guy that you're talking about in the New Testament. The New Testament is a mixture of myths and mythologies from a bunch of different people who claim to be following the teachings of Jesus, right? There's no evidence for divine birth. There's no evidence for the miracles that he's reported to do, and there's no evidence of a resurrection. All of those things are stories, bro. So in terms of that guy actually existing in that capacity, there's no good reason to think he did. Well, being good is relative, though, isn't it? It depends on what your ethical frameworks are. What is you actually judging to be good or bad? Good and bad itself is just a value judgment. So what one person finds good, another might find bad. So, you know what I've noticed with this boss fight as well? If you don't restart the console completely, he will start adapting to your fighting style. Do you notice how he moved differently this time compared to the first fight? The more you grind bosses in this game, is the more they adapt to you. Ah, he turned around. Oh. Oh, he's got me. He's dead. Oh, he almost got me in the head. Ah, a bit slow there. Yeah, so without the supernatural stuff, then you don't really get to make any supernatural claims. That's the problem you're missing. As I said, if I was being charitable, I could say there was a Bronze Age Judaic priest called Yeshua. But without the supernatural evidences, you don't get to make the supernatural claims. Look at that. Behind all of these gods, it's just a bloody elden beast. Some creature from outer space. Or what if that was the case in reality? Yeah, I don't think there were any teachings that Jesus gave that were exclusive to Christianity as a religion. I think what people point to is the culmination of different ideologies being grouped through Christianity. That's what they point to being its its speciality, if you will. And you know what? I only found out that you could use the you could use the horse on my most recent playthrough. So all the other playthroughs was like just on foot. I forgot to use magic. Come here. Got the wrong sword out. What we want is a sword that we can buff and then use that on him. Yeah, this weapon's not really that strong. Let's switch it. Ooh, I deserve that. I saw it coming too. Too slow.
Try summon middle of the realm. Yeah, this is an L fight, we've lost. Oh, fuck. Yeah, cooked. Lost this one. GG's, bro. Oh, wait. I could use, Nope. Not gonna get a chance to use it. Lost this one. Oh! That was the wrong thing to do! No way! I tried to do Lord's Hill. I deserved that. Alright, better luck next time, I guess. Well, Yits, so Pixels, why don't you give us that evidence of how God created humans? Don't just don't imply it. Prove it. Give us the evidence, sir. Should I give it one more try if we're in the stream? Just for the fun of it. I don't really want to complete the game though until we finish the DLC. That would be kind of a little bit jarring. But we don't actually have to start the game over, as far as I'm aware. You could just choose to go back to the round table. What we might want is I do want to try those DLC weapons, but they ain't gonna cut it right now. I think we can get him with Moonville. Sub Zach. Have a great day to you too, man. Well, great day to you too, sir. Good day, good sir. Hi, it despawned. What's going on? Oh yeah, go on. You should still be glowing. Ah, why isn't it working? That's unfortunate. Oh well. If you're wondering what I was trying to do, I'm trying to get it so I get extra flask. Usually if you use a flask and sit down at Site of Grace, you'll keep the buff. So when you leave the Site of Grace, you've got the buff still. Then you still get an extra flask to use later. Ah, nah, truly messed up there. No one invented humans, bro. All known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. If your god requires belief, imagination or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. It's likely somebody had to devise the concept of God and impart it to you for you to interact with it, or you yourself had to devise a concept of God in order to interact with it. Throughout human history, right, there's not been one universal idea of God.
Every culture has produced significant ideas of God based on their cultural and personal needs. No one in human history has ever gone out onto their native land and discovered the God of another land. Okay? There's literally no evidence that gods exist as independent entities. What does independent entity mean? It doesn't require your mind in order for it to exist. There's no evidence that gods have ever existed as independent agents. What does independent agent mean? They have the capacity to do things on their own. Right? So there's no evidence that gods have ever existed and had the capacity to affect our reality in any meaningful way. All God concepts are formulated in the minds of men and transmitted from man to man. You think your God concept is the one and true real one? Feel free to demonstrate proof of that. And that's my time. So we'll do this fight one more time. Oh, I gave him the wrong sword. Yeah, we messed up already. But he has got magic. Yeah, this would be a lot easier if Mimic had his trident. Watch him just change directions. Wasted it. There's not much you can do about that one. Huh? Oh yeah. Yep. I messed up. Wasted a rune. So no, it's so annoying. Wasted a rune and many flasks. The fastest way to do this is to make sure Mimic has the trident. He's dead anyway. But he's messed up my scheme. He's thwarted my scheme. Irony is, who ever told you that pearls had value? This is the stupidness of human hubris. Who told you, right, that some bloody minerals produced by whatever it is, a clam, had any significant value in the first place? You're an idiot. You think you're saying something wise, but you're actually stupid. Just regurgitating things because you think it's clever, but who told you a bloody pearl had any value in the first place? Now, I understand it metaphorically, but you're not really taking it in. Who convinced you that a pearl had any value? No, I've got the wrong weapon. God damn. Oh, yeah, I've really cooked myself. Can't even ride the horse with that many flasks. Ah, we messed up. Anyways, last time I'm doing this fight today. After this, I'll be out. the same way, some weirdo men were like, yo, I like shiny things. Now gold and silver has value. It's like, prior to that, no, we just use gold to make things look pretty. Oh no, actually I've decided I like gold so much I'm going to smash your head in with a rock so I can take it from you. And then we're in the system that we're in now because of it. Alright, you died. So, appreciate all for tuning in. I'm going to leave you with this. All known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. In fact, actually, I'm going to walk you through the claim before I leave because we did a lot of gaming. So, when I say humans invented God, it's what's called an explanatory claim. I feel it has explanatory success because we're able to justify, well not even justify, give you the how and the why, and in some instances the when and the where. Speaking of the when and the where, a picture of the Levant is currently on the screen. That's the when and the where in terms of the evolutionary development of your God of the Bible. Right? That's when and where could be found in that region of the world. But back to the main topic. When I say humans invented God, it's called an explanatory claim, and I feel it has explanatory success because it fulfills the how, the why, and in some instances the when and the where. It also has predictive capabilities, meaning we can account for God concepts and God types that might pop up in the future, why people believe them, where they come from, without having to posit the existence of a supernatural entity of any kind. Right? So in terms of the how is very important. We just not justify, again, I don't know why it's justifies in my mind, right? We support a claim like this through three main topics, right? Archaeology, artifacts that humans leave behind found in the ground. Anthropology, the study of humans and human history and cultures. And then cognitive science, the study of human minds, why you do what you do, okay? So, what's the primary first phase of God creation? It's called assigning agency to things. And what is the mechanism in which allows us to assign agency to things? It's a cognitive theory called hyperactive agency detection device. On the screen, you can see a little brief blurb on what it is. Hyperactive agency detection device is a cognitive theory suggesting humans have an evolved built-in tendency to quickly attribute events and movements to intentional agents, e.g. people, spirits, gods, ghosts, ghouls, phantoms, souls. It's done to enhance survival, even when none exist. It acts like a mental smoke detector for threats, which explains beliefs in the supernatural and feelings of being watched. The first phase of God creation, which is assigning agency to things, is an observational thing. So we can make use of it today. I'll give you an example in a minute, but our ancestors made use of it primarily in the past to describe elemental things, which is earth, wind, water and fire, mixtures of those, and celestial things, which is heavenly bodies. Think of seeing an eclipse or something to that effect, right? So our ancestors would assign agency to things. What that looks like in the modern context, you're laying in bed, you hear a bump in the night, right? And immediately from that sensory data, which is the sound, right, your mind goes into like, you want to say fight, flight, the freeze mode, right? But during that like almost instantaneous process, right, you will assign agency to the sound you heard. So you'd be like, that's a thief breaking in, oh, that's someone going to the fridge, that's the dog, that's a ghost, that's a soul, right? That's an example of what it looks like in modern times. Like someone said earlier on, so what would you think if a chair just started moving on its own? You'd say it's a ghost, isn't it? That's an example of hyperactive agency detection device, okay? How that looked in the past to our ancestors. Our ancestors would have experienced something me and you know today to be a thunderstorm, where there's thunder and there's lightning, there's a blackening of the skies. There's all of these sensory experiences that entail a thunderstorm. In few words, they would have experienced what we call lightning. They would have said, I have a mind, but I don't understand that thing. Therefore, there must be a mind higher than mine who either understands that thing or is responsible for that thing, or that thing itself is acting on its own accord. So they give lightning its own mind, thunder its own mind, right? Through that process, they build story around that. It becomes legend, becomes what's called lore. Culturally, it's passed on and then gets deified. Why would any of that happen? It's done to buttress chances of survival, right? To ensure the evolution of people and their survival. If you tell a story about an event, people know the signs to look for to make sure they survive said event in the future. As time progresses, cultures build what you call rituals around these things, and they start to try to appease this element thing or this celestial thing by, giving it offerings, etc. Like really primitive religions and stuff like that. But basically, phase one of God creation is assigning agency to things, okay? And it's done using this. The how is hyperactive agency detection device. It's coined by a guy called Justin Barrett. The idea existed before he codified it, truthfully, right? But it was coined by a guy called Justin Barrett. Had posits that are false positives seen an agent where there isn't one. So, for example, you're out hunting and gathering, you and a mate, you see a bush rustle like there's something in it, or the bush itself was moving erratically. Your mate takes off running, right? Why does he take off running? Because psychologically he's assigned agency to the event of the bush rustling. So therefore, to him, the bush is a predator, or it has a predator in it. For you who stays and doesn't run off, you might find out that there is a predator in there and you would die, right? Whereas your mate that ran off, his chances of survival are way higher than yours, right? That's what that looks like. So, coined by Justin Barrett, had posits that a false positive seen an agent where there isn't one was safer in ancestral environments than a false negative, missing a real threat. This hypersensitivity leads to anthropomorphizing, giving things human nature. Seeing purpose in randomness, also known as pareidolia, apophenia, right, and forms the foundation for religious beliefs. Okay, that entails the how and the why of phase 1 of God creation. Phase 2 of God creation is the ability to use what's called abstraction, right? So phase 1 was observational, phase 2 is psychological. When we start thinking about abstractions, right, or abstracts, right? I don't know why my voice is a little bit weird at the minute. We're thinking about things that don't have a visual, tangible representation. So think about things like love, think about things like magic, things like death, things like creation, right? These things can be expressed through various different means and avenues, but themselves, they're conceptual primarily, right? This is a psychological thing that is part of human mental development or cognitive development. So phase 1 is assigning agency to things. Phase 2 is abstraction. Why do we do this abstraction? It's for psychological needs, psychological comfort, to give certainty where there's uncertainty. You can now begin to develop ideas and answer questions that you have, right? Things like, let's not get too lost in analogy, right? But when you start to conceptualize things and create abstracts, over time you can deify these abstracts, and you'll see this play out in phase 3 of God creation. Phase 3 of God creation is anthropomorphizing, and it's done for societal cohesion. So you can now start to stack the first 2 elements of God creation, agency and abstraction, with an anthropomorphic element. Now you start to see what's called pantheons spring up across civilizations in the world. Why is this happening? During phase 1 and phase 2, we're doing what's called hunting and gathering. During phase 3, we're fully into what's called agriculture, polis, city building, civilization building. So our gods start to mirror humans directly, right? They mirror our hierarchies, they mirror our anatomy, right? But then we give them an elemental nature like earth, wind, water and fire. Then we give them a celestial nature representing the sun, a moon, a star, right? And then we give them an abstract nature, love, war, magic, death, right? I'll show you an example of this just now. But why would you do this for societal cohesion? It allows us to organize society and mobilize people under ideologies. You get your proto-religions, you get your temples, and this is necessary for the expansion of civilization. Okay, so how does this play out? God creations have to go through an evolutionary trajectory, just like humans have to go through an evolutionary trajectory. Do you know why? Gods primarily are abstract constructs. Historically, there's never been a universal singular idea of what a god is. Right? Each culture across the planet has put forth their own concepts and ideas for what gods are to them, right? Which makes them cultural inventions. Saying that, because they're not universal concepts, people can't go out onto their native land and discover gods, much less their own god. They can't discover no one else's god from another region in the world, right? The only way you can have an understanding of a god is that somebody transmits this concept to you via language, via painting, via artifact, okay? So on the screen is not even close to an exhaustive list of gods from different regions and different times in the world. As I said, your phases of God creation is assigning agency to things, abstraction, and anthropomorphizing, or basically, yeah, you'll see, right, what I'm trying to explain. So I know I'm not explaining it great in this point, but I've explained it like 3 times in the stream earlier. So if you want to rewind it, it's on Culture Crack over on YouTube or Culture Crack on Twitch. Okay. So, an example of this, as we're moving out of hunting and gathering into civilizations and agriculture. First on our list, Mesopotamia, which is modern day Iraq, also one of the oldest known civilizations to write things down. Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, they produced a god called Enlil. How do we know anything about this, right? As I said earlier on, to justify a claim such as humans invented God, we need some substantial platforms to work from. Archaeology, things found in the ground left behind by humans. Anthropology, study of cultures and human histories, religions, rituals, etc. And of course, cognitive science, that was your hyperactive agency detection device, then your psychological needs, then your anthropomorphizing. That was the how and the why. Okay, so Mesopotamia, Enlil, god of wind, air, and storms. Right, that's found in the Sumerian culture. Being a god of wind, air, and storms is assigning agency to something elemental. Okay, that's phase 1. Egypt, Northern Africa, Ra, a sun god. That's assigning agency to something celestial. Okay, if you don't know what assigning agency means, it's literally saying that thing has the capacity to act on its own accord. Right, it may not have a mind like ours, but it has some kind of nature where it can think, it can move, it can do things on its own accord. Right, it's literally what agency means, the capacity to act. Right, maybe not dictionary definition, but you can look into it further. Right, so Egypt, Northern Africa, Ra, sun god, that's assigning agency to a celestial entity. Right? So phase 1. But it's also a creator god, right? What is a creator god? A creator god is something abstract, right? You can express creation, but creation itself is an abstract concept. Right? So you see how the phase 1 and phase 2 stack? Ra is also anthropomorphic, but he takes on an animal head. An animal head can be found in a configuration of what's called animism, spirits that inhabit nature. Right? So not only does he have an elemental nature, he has a celestial nature, he has an anthropomorphic nature, but he also has an animalistic nature too, right? Again, a human devised concept, right? Greece, Europe, Zeus, king of gods, sky and thunder, right? Oh, he's also the god of sky and thunder, right? Did I read that right? Yeah, so a king of gods is directly mirroring human hierarchy, right? That's an anthropomorphic feature. All god concepts are anthropocentric, if that's the right way to say it. They center around humans. All god concepts, in whichever form you get them, they center around humans. But being a king of the gods is directly mirroring human hierarchy. Where is a king found? In a system of governance called monarchy. Okay. In the same way, if I was going to write down a genealogy, you see the first dad and the first mum, and under the first dad and the first mum, there's their family, their family's family's family. This is how these pantheons are devised to mirror human hierarchy. Truth be told, we've always been telling the story of human progress and the story of Earth through our god concepts and religions, right? But Zeus, king of gods, right? That's an anthropomorphic feature, directly mirroring human nature. But he is also the god of sky and thunder, assigning agency to elemental things. So as you can see, the 3 phases of God creation are prominent in all God concepts, right? You can go through this whole list. Norse, Scandinavia, Odin, wisdom, war, death, magic. Phase 2, right? India, South Asia, Shiva, god of destruction and transformation. Phase 2, China, East Asia, Yu Huang, Jade Emperor, supreme ruler of heaven. That's phase 3, right? I'm not sure what the other natures of that god is, right? But Japan, East Asia, Amaterasu, sun goddess, central to imperial myth, right? Sun goddess is phase 1. Yoruba, West Africa, Shango, god of thunder and lightning, phase 1. Aztec, Mesoamerica, this one's interesting. Quetzalcoatl, a feathered serpent god of wind and learning, right? You got elemental, you got animistic, if that's the right way to put it, and you've got abstract. Okay, these are various different concepts that humans are melding together to produce their gods for their regions and their lands. It goes further. It's not even close to exhaustive. In fact, I think for every region on this list, there are various different gods and cultures in that region. Obviously. But that being said, historically, there's never been one universal configuration of a god. Right? So you have a god. How can I give an example? Right? You have a god itself, right? And how you conceptualize the god, you give it its nature, give it its sun power, give it its wind power, give it its abstract power, give it its anthropomorphism. But that god itself slots into a configuration, right? And the configurations are as follows. Right? On the screen, I'll put a list. And again, I don't think this is an exhaustive list of configurations. There are probably others out there that I'm not aware of. So Ra, for instance, like I was just saying, a sun god, a creation god, it itself has its own attributes, but Ra himself plugs into a system, and that system that Ra plugs into would be more like polytheism, right? Or henotheism, because actually in ancient Egypt there were various different cults that all coexisted with their gods, you know, and their corresponding temples, etc., and cults. But right, historically there's never been a universal god type, god archetype, right? There's never been a universal system. They've always varied culture to culture, region to region. So if you had to explain it to a child, historically there's never been one type of god, and no one has ever been able to go out onto their native land and discover the god of another country, another type of god, right? Humans have always devised gods for their cultural needs and the purposes that they had for them. So what are those configurations or systems of gods? Monotheism, one all-powerful god, that's found in Christianity, Islam, Judaism. Polytheism, many gods with different roles, that's found in Greek, Norse and Hinduism, right? Vocabulary's a bit weird. Henotheism, one main god but others exist, that's early Israel and Hindu sects. That is very important in terms of the god creation trajectory or evolution. The Israelites or Israel is what gives birth to Judaism. Judaism gives birth to Christianity. Christianity and Judaism give birth to Islam. Okay? Those three are the most prominent monotheistic religions of our time, right? In the future, who knows what it will be, but as it stands, those three are the most prominent religions on the planet. Those three subscribe to a system called monotheism. But in order to arrive at monotheism, you have to have the history of what happens with the early Israelites in the Levant, as that picture showed you earlier on. Right, carrying on. We'll get to your God of the Bible, whether or not you think it's unique is a different conversation. So henotheism, one main god but others exist, that's early Israel and some Hindu sects. Pantheism, God is the universe, that's Spinoza and Advaita Vedanta, it's more of a philosophical type of god. Panentheism, God is in all but beyond all, some mysticism and process theology. Deism, a non-intervening creator god, that's from the Enlightenment deists. Animism, spirits that inhabit nature, that's many gods, but yeah, I'm distracted, sorry. Guess I'm looking at the chat. Look at the chat, right? Animism, spirits that inhabit nature, that could be many different gods, right? And that comes from Shinto and indigenous beliefs, thought to be the oldest known god configuration, right? Dualism, two opposing cosmic powers, that's Zoroastrianism and Gnosticism. But for you to get the God in the Bible, you have to have a history, right? And it goes on an evolutionary trajectory that starts with the earliest layer being the Sumerians, Mesopotamia. And their primary gods was Inanna, Ishtar, Anu, and Enlil. And around those gods, they built various stories. You got an ark story, you got the Epic of Gilgamesh, you got the Creationist tablets. Their descendants, which would be the Israelites, the Canaanites, Babylonians, etc., build off these stories left behind by the Mesopotamians, right? And they're roaming around in a desert as like nomadic tribes. They're very much war-orientated people in the Middle East. Don't ask me why. Maybe that's just the picture we've got of them. In fact, of course there's agriculture happening necessary for survival, but in the desert it's not really about growing crops per se, right? It's more about conquering, extracting resources from wherever and whenever you can, kind of thing. Okay. But that being said, the Israelites produce a god called Yahweh, right? It's known as the personal god. Oh, what we got there? It's known as the personal god of the Israelites. There's more to it. It's very much more complex. Like Bible lovers, theologians can give you a more in-depth breakdown than I can, or I'm willing to. But in order to get to God of the Bible, God the Father, if you're a Trinitarian, Jesus, okay, the God of Abraham, if you're a Muslim, okay, this stuff has to happen. Yahweh was the personal name of God of Israel, represented in a tetragrammaton, YHWH. originated as an ancient Semitic deity in the southern Levant/Midian region, likely during the Late Bronze Age and Early Iron Age. It's often associated with storms and war. Like you see that phase 1, phase 2, right? Often associated with storm and war. Right? Yahweh emerged as the national god of Israel and Judah, eventually evolving into the focus of monotheism through a process of syncretism with the high god El and a separation of local cults like Baal. Right? Syncretism is literally just a merging of these god cultures. It's not much different to how when Christendom took place in Europe, in order for Christianity to like successfully merge with people's cultures, people mixed in their like Nordic, their Anglo traditions on the way. So they became Christians, but they mixed in parts of their original traditions and cultures. Right, similar thing, but more nuance in this case. Right, but El Elyon is the god of the Canaanites. Okay, he was like the king god of the Canaanites. So when the Israelites get hold of El Elyon, finally, after whatever weird stuff happens, they give the element of him being the All-Father, like Odin is the All-Father, like Zeus is the All-Father. They give that right, that title to Yahweh. Yahweh then becomes the one God, right? Under him, Asherah gets removed from the picture. Asherah was Yahweh's wife, okay? Or, you know, his not Yahweh, sorry, El's wife. There was another god called Marduk, and then there was another god called Baal. We do have some visual aids, but I just can't find them by name at the minute. But yeah, all that being said, right, Yahweh was originally a storm warrior god, then becomes God the Father. If Jesus actually existed, he would have been born to the tribe of Jews who had by that time mixed with the gone through Egypt, come out of Egypt, mixed with the Zoroastrianists, and finalized their idea of what God would be in the Torah and in the Old Testament, right? And at that point, that is when the Roman Empire, after the alleged demise of Jesus, began to devise the New Testament by collecting all of these various stories from his followers who had split up amongst the Roman Empire. So you had like Greeks, Hebrews, Jews, Romans, Phoenicians, Egyptians, right, were all under this mixture of the Roman Empire at the time, and they all claimed to be followers of a guy called Christ. But each of these different sects of followers of the guy called Christ mixed in their cultural stories with their telling of Jesus. As I explained earlier on, a similar thing happens culturally. In order for a new idea to be fully amalgamated or become a part of your culture, you have to mix it in. Think about how in West Africa, when they start to try to convert people into Christians, they mix in stories of their gods too, right? And then they adapt the names to meet with Christianity, a mesh. Okay, this is what cultures do. But during this period after the alleged demise of Jesus, you've got Phoenicians, etc., mixing their ideas and their mythos in with the stories of Jesus. This is where you get the mystical, magical stories. But in order for it to actually be a functional, cohesive piece of work known as the New Testament, the Council of Nicaea gets formed, and they take all of these various stories. At that point, there was two competing schools of thought. One was what you say, Jesus is God in a Trinitarian configuration, and the others was known as Arians, right? They said, no, this guy isn't God, he's just like got some really good teachings and part of this canon. Okay, the Trinitarian view wins out in the Council of Nicaea, and the New Testament is codified from then on. All right, but if you're speaking to a guy like me who's telling you humans invented God, that whole story is an evolutionary trajectory of God creations in order to get to the God you believe to today. But it didn't just stop there, right? After that fact of codifying the Bible, right, various different interpreters and teachers of the Bible go on to add or buttress theology with philosophy. It's where you end up with an omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, immaterial, disembodied spirit known as God. Okay, that's an evolutionary trajectory of God creation. Different concepts coming together, right? Different cultures meeting and passing out data. Okay, whether you call him Allah, Hashem, Adonai, God, Yahweh, you know, I won't necessarily say Shiva and those kinds of gods, because those gods are kind of technically older and on their own. They stand on their own, right? But God concepts have to mix in order for you to get the God that you believe in today. So for you to convince me that the God you believe in today is in fact its own entity that operates in any meaningful way, you got a hell of a lot of work cut out for you if I know the genealogy of your God in the first place. So back to the point. Humans invented God. All known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. If your God requires belief, imagination, or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. Okay, someone has to devise that concept of God and impart it to you, like through that process I just walked you through historically, or you yourself have to devise a concept of God in order to interact with it in any meaningful way. It's going to take a while for the stream to catch up. Wow, stream is jamming. Anyways, YouTube heard all that. I'll see you a lot later.